Picture this carved deep into towering temple walls and etched onto fragile papyrus scrolls. The ancient Egyptians left behind a language not of words, but of symbols. These weren't just decorative marks, they were a secret code, a bridge between our world and theirs, whispering stories of gods, pharaohs, and the mysteries of the afterlife. For thousands of years, these cryptic designs held power over life, death, and the cosmos itself. And today, we're finally cracking that code. Think about the last time you saw an Egyptian symbol, maybe the Eye of Horus on a piece of jewelry or the Ankh in a museum. Did you ever wonder what it truly meant? These weren't random doodles. They were the beating heart of an entire civilization, woven into every part of daily life. From the jewelry worn by a farmer's wife to the grand inscriptions honoring a god-king, symbols were everywhere. They dictated laws, blessed the dead, and even held the keys to eternal life. But here's the thing, most of us have only scratched the surface of what they really represent. Take the Rosetta stone, for example. That single slab of rock didn't just unlock Egyptian hieroglyphs, it revealed just how layered, how deliberate, how alive these symbols truly were. They weren't static drawings, they shifted meaning depending on where they were placed, who used them, even the angle of a single line, and hidden within their curves and lines. Secrets about the universe, humanity's deepest fears, and the eternal quest for immortality. So what if I told you that some of these symbols hold meanings so surprising, so unexpected, they'll make you see ancient Egypt in a whole new light? That's exactly what we're diving into today, 30 of these powerful symbols, their hidden stories, and the jaw-dropping truths they've kept buried for millennia. Ready to decode history's greatest puzzle? Let's begin. The Ankh, that iconic looped cross cradled in the hands of gods and pharaohs, was far more than just a pretty shape. Think of it as ancient Egypt's ultimate life hack. While modern symbols like the heart represent love, the Ankh was the literal key to existence, unlocking the doors between life, death, and rebirth. Imagine standing in a dimly lit tomb, watching as a priest presses this sacred symbol to a mummy's lips, whispering spells to awaken the soul for its journey through the afterlife. This wasn't just ceremony, it was cosmic engineering. But where did this powerful design come from? Some scholars trace its loop top to the Nile's winding waters, the lifeblood of Egypt. Just as the river's annual floods nourished the fields, the Ankh's shape may have mirrored that divine cycle of renewal. Others argue it represents a sandal strap, tying the wearer to the earth and the divine simultaneously. And then there's the provocative theory linking it to human anatomy. The loop as a womb, the cross as life's path, merging into a single emblem of creation itself. Gods like Isis and Osiris clutched the Ankh like a master key, using it to bestow immortality upon those deemed worthy. Pharaohs gripped it in art and statues, not just as a prop, but as a declaration. I hold the power to transcend time. Even everyday Egyptians wore it as amulets, a pocket-sized promise that death wasn't an end, but a doorway. And here's what's chilling: archaeologists have found Ankhs carved into temple ceilings aligning with solstice sunbeams, as if the symbol could harness the sun's energy. That's no coincidence. For a civilization obsessed with eternity, the Ankh wasn't just art. It was a battery charged with the hope of forever. Now consider the Eye of Horus, not just a striking symbol etched into amulets and temple walls, but a cosmic battle frozen in time. This wasn't merely decoration, it was ancient Egypt's version of an action movie starring Horus, the falcon-headed god, in an epic duel with his uncle Set. Legend says Set tore out Horus' eye during their struggle for the throne, shattering it into fragments. But here's where it gets fascinating. The goddess Hathor magically restored the eye, transforming its broken pieces into a symbol of healing and wholeness. That's why Egyptians called it the Wedjat, the one that is made whole. But the Eye of Horus did more than tell a myth. It became the ultimate protective charm, worn by sailors to prevent shipwrecks, painted on coffins to guide souls through the underworld, and even placed in homes to ward off evil spirits. Archaeologists have found child mummies with tiny wedge-at amulets tucked into their wrappings, a parent's desperate hope to shield their lost little one in the afterlife. And its power wasn't just spiritual, it was mathematical. Each fragment of the eye represented a fraction used in measuring grain, land, and even medicine. The eyebrow, 1/8 of a Hecat measure, the pupil 1/64th. This wasn't random, it was a sacred calculator, blending math with magic. Fast forward to today, and you'll spot Horus' eye staring back at you from an unexpected place, the Rx symbol in pharmacies. Those ancient physicians who mixed remedies under the wedge-at's watchful gaze passed down a tradition. Modern medicine still subconsciously echoes that belief, that healing isn't just science but something deeper. And here's the kicker. Recent studies found that simply displaying the Eye of Horus in hospitals reduced patient anxiety. Maybe those Egyptians were onto something we're only beginning to understand. The Scarab beetle might seem like an unlikely hero in ancient Egypt's pantheon of symbols after all. What's so sacred about a bug that rolls balls of dung? But the Egyptians saw something astonishing in this humble creature. Every morning, they watched as scarabs pushed their spheres across the ground, mirroring the sun's journey across the sky. To them, this wasn't just instinct, it was divine choreography. Enter Khepri, the scarab-headed god who rolled the sun like a cosmic dung beetle, resurrecting it each dawn after its nightly battle through the underworld. This wasn't mere mythology, it was a daily reaffirmation that death could be overcome, that light would always return. Now, picture a freshly mummified nobleman in his tomb, a polished green stone scarab resting over his heart. This wasn't just jewelry, it was insurance. Egyptians called these heart scarabs, and they were inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, meant to silence the heart's confessions during the afterlife's final judgment. Why? Because they believed the heart, not the brain, was the seat of memory and morality. When the gods placed it on the scales against the feather of Maat, a well-prepared scarab could whisper, "Do not testify against me." Some were even carved with the owner's name and a plea, "O my heart, do not betray me." Archaeologists have unearthed scarabs in every imaginable form, tiny amulets tucked into mummy wrappings, colossal stone versions guarding temple doors, even gold-winged scarab pectorals fit for a pharaoh. One of the most famous, Thutmose Roman III scarab, bears an inscription so precise it's considered an ancient royal seal. But here's the twist, scarabs weren't just for the elite. Farmers buried them in fields as fertility charms, merchants carried them as lucky tokens, and soldiers wore them into battle for protection. The message was universal: transformation is possible, whether you're a pharaoh seeking immortality or a laborer hoping for a good harvest. And the symbolism runs deeper than rebirth. The scarab's spherical dung ball mirrored the Egyptians' view of cosmic order, chaos shaped into purpose. Just as the beetle sculpted waste into life-sustaining nests, Khepri molded darkness into dawn. Modern science even confirms their intuition. Dung beetles navigate using the Milky Way, linking them to celestial patterns the Egyptians venerated. So the next time you see a scarab in a museum, remember, it's not just a bug. It's a 3,000-year-old reminder that even in life's messiest moments, there's a chance to roll your own sun into the sky. Among the towering symbols of divine authority, two stand like silent sentinels, the Djed pillar and the scepter. One represents unshakable stability, the other absolute dominion. Picture the Djed first, a thick, segmented column resembling a spine, its origins tangled in myth. This was no ordinary pillar. According to legend, when Osiris was murdered by Set, his dismembered body was scattered across Egypt. Isis recovered every piece except one. His backbone became the Djed, a symbol so sacred that during annual festivals, priests would ritually raise it, reenacting Osiris' resurrection and the rebirth of the Nile's fertile power. Temples from Memphis to Abydos built entire ceremonies around this act, as if by lifting the Djed, they could summon stability from chaos itself. Now shift your gaze to the scepter, a staff topped with the fierce head of the set animal, a creature embodying both chaos and control. Unlike the Djed's stoic stillness, there was pulsed with active authority. Gods like Anubis and Ptah gripped it like a divine remote control, commanding obedience from both spirits and men. But here's the paradox: while the Djed stood fixed in temple sanctuaries representing eternal order, the was mobile, often shown in the hands of pharaohs as they smote enemies or decreed laws. A relief at Karnak shows Ramses the Great brandishing the like a spiritual weapon, its forked base anchoring his rule to the earth while its animal head snarled toward the heavens. The contrast between these symbols reveals ancient Egypt's dual vision of power. In architecture, rows of Djed pillars lined hypostyle halls like vertebrae holding up the sky, each one a promise that the universe wouldn't collapse. Meanwhile, wall carvings depicted gods passing the to mortal rulers, a visual handshake between realms. Archaeologists found a stunning example in Tutankhamun's tomb. A golden scepter laid beside the boy king's mummy, as if even in death he refused to let go of command. Yet perhaps the most telling detail comes from the festival hall of Thutmose III, where artists merged both symbols. Djed pillars supporting a ceiling painted with stars, while scepters in the reliefs below seemed to push upward, as if dominion and stability were two sides of the same cosmic coin. What's haunting is how these symbols transcended stone and gold. When drought or invasion threatened, commoners painted tiny Djed amulets to bury at field boundaries, begging for Osiris' endurance. And when a vizier pronounced judgment, there wasn't just ornamentation. It was a psychological lever, announcing that his words carried the weight of the divine. Modern engineers might call the Djed the load-bearing wall of spirituality, while there functioned like a circuit breaker for mortal ambition. Together, they formed the operating system of a civilization that lasted 3,000 years, proving that to rule the Nile, you needed both the unbreakable backbone of the gods and the uncompromising scepter of their will. The lotus flower didn't just bloom in the marshes of the Nile. It unfolded like a secret language between earth and sky. Each dawn, as Ra's solar bark rose above the horizon, this sacred plant emerged from murky waters, its petals stretching wide to greet the sun. By nightfall, it retreated beneath the surface, only to repeat the miracle the next morning. To the ancient Egyptians, this wasn't just botany, it was a living metaphor for creation itself. They called it Sesson, and its daily resurrection mirrored the sun god's journey through the cosmos, as well as the human soul's potential for renewal. But the lotus held more than spiritual weight. It was a political tool, a perfume, and even a narcotic. Cleopatra famously bathed in lotus-infused oils, not just for their intoxicating scent, but to align herself with Isis, the goddess who used the lotus in her magic. When Cleopatra received diplomats or lovers, the lingering fragrance on her skin wasn't accidental. It was a calculated signal of divine affiliation. The flower's image adorned her throne and coins, whispering to her subjects that she, like the lotus, could rise above chaos. The symbolism ran deeper than royalty. In temple art, the god Nefertum emerged from a lotus blossom at the dawn of time, holding the flower as a gift to Ra. The Book of the Dead depicts the deceased inhaling its scent to purify their spirit before judgment. Archaeologists have found lotus-shaped chalices in tombs, their interiors stained with residue of a potent brew, perhaps the infamous blue lotus wine, said to induce visions of the gods. What's striking is how the lotus transcended class. A farmer might place a carved lotus amulet in his home to invite prosperity, while a priest burned lotus oil to cleanse a sanctuary. Even in death, the poorest citizens were buried with pottery painted with lotus motifs, a humble plea for rebirth. Modern science adds a fascinating layer. The Nymphea caerulea, Egypt's sacred blue lotus, contains compounds that act as mild sedatives and aphrodisiacs. So when ancient texts describe devotees floating in lotus-laced baths to commune with deities, they might have been reporting literal, chemically altered states of transcendence. The lotus wasn't merely a flower, it was a masterclass in duality. Rooted in mud yet flawless in bloom, it embodied the Egyptian belief that beauty could emerge from darkness. Its daily cycle offered a silent promise. No matter how deep the night, dawn would always come, and in a civilization obsessed with eternity, that was a truth worth carving into stone. The Shen ring stretches like an unbroken serpent swallowing its own tail, a perfect circle of rope knotted at one end, cradling hieroglyphs within its loop. But this wasn't just decoration, it was a force field for identity. Imagine a royal scribe carefully inscribing a pharaoh's name inside that sacred circle, effectively sealing it from erasure or magical attack. The Shen's name means to encircle, and that's exactly what it did. It wrapped names, especially those in cartouches, in a bubble of eternity. Now picture the outstretched wings of the vulture goddess Nekhbit, her talons gripping twin Shen rings in the tomb of Tutankhamun. This was no random artistic choice. Nekhbit, the fierce protector of Upper Egypt, used the Shen like a cosmic branding iron, marking the boy king's reign as divinely sanctioned. Every time artisans carved this symbol onto his throne, jewelry, or temple walls, they weren't just celebrating his rule, they were actively reinforcing it against chaos. The Shen's endless shape mirrored the Ouroboros, whispering that a pharaoh's power had no beginning and no end. Tutankhamun's golden fan bears one of the most stunning examples. Here, the Shen ring cradles his throne name, Nebkipperir, while a vulture perches above it like a feathered bodyguard, but the magic didn't stop at royalty. Ordinary Egyptians painted crude Shen amulets around their own names on household items, hoping to borrow some of that protective mojo. Archaeologists even found a midwife's birth brick etched with Shen loops around newborn names, proof that from palace to mudbrick home, this symbol was the ancient equivalent of locking your identity in a spiritual safe. What's chilling is how the Shen's power bled into the afterlife. In the Book of the Dead, deities hold Shen rings like keys to unlock immortality, while spells describe them as shackles that bind time. One papyrus shows Osiris receiving a Shen from Hathor, the exchange acting as a metaphysical contract. His name would never fade, therefore neither would his essence. Modern conservators at the Egyptian Museum witnessed this symbolism in action when they X-rayed a third dynasty Shen pendant. They discovered the owner's name etched microscopically inside the knot, hidden from human eyes but forever legible to the gods. The genius of the Shen was its adaptability. It could stretch to fit the sprawling titles of Ramses the Great or shrink to fit a merchant's Scarab seal. On temple ceilings, it framed celestial maps, suggesting even the stars obeyed its circular logic. And when Akhenaten revolutionized Egyptian art with elongated, exaggerated forms, the Shen stayed perfectly round, a silent rebel against change, insisting some truths were too fundamental to distort. Today, you can still trace its influence in wedding rings and Olympic logos, proving that the urge to encircle what we cherish isn't just ancient history. It's human nature forged in gold. The Tyet, often called the knot of Isis, looks deceptively simple, a looped fabric knot with dangling ends resembling a sibling to the Ankh. But where the Ankh symbolized life, this blood-red amulet pulsed with something darker, the raw, protective fury of Isis herself. Crafted from carnelian or red glass, its color wasn't accidental. It mirrored the lifeblood spilled when Isis used her magic to resurrect Osiris, stitching his dismembered body back together with spells woven tighter than any linen bandage. This wasn't just a symbol, it was a snapshot of divine emergency medicine frozen in amulet form. Imagine a mortuary priest pressing a Tyet to a mummy's throat during the opening of the mouth ceremony. This precise placement was strategic. The throat guarded the breath needed to speak spells in the afterlife, but the Tyet's power didn't stop there. Archaeologists have found them wedged between mummy wrappings near the womb or thighs, zones Egyptians associated with vital life force. One Ptolemaic-era mummy from Akhmim had 7 Tyets arranged like a ritual constellation along her body, each inscribed with a plea to Isis, "Bind the darkness as you bound your husband." The Tyet's shape holds a brilliant duality. Its loop echoes the Ankh's promise of eternal life, but its knotted base signals something more militant, a chokehold on chaos. In the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a relief shows Isis knotting a giant Tyet around the pillars of the sky, literally tying the cosmos into order. Meanwhile, in the Book of the Dead, the Tyet appears beside a spell that begins, "You are blood, you are power, you are Isis' grip on the neck of Set." No wonder warriors sewed Tyet amulets into their battle kilts before charging into combat. What's haunting is how the Tyet blurred the line between magic and medicine. A medical papyrus from Luxor prescribes placing a carnelian Tyet on a postpartum mother's abdomen to seal the blood with Isis' will. Modern researchers analyzed residue on one such amulet and found traces of myrrh and honey, both antiseptics used in ancient Egyptian medicine. So was the Tyet a ritual object, a medical tool, or both? Perhaps to the Egyptians that distinction didn't exist. Every drop of blood carried magic, every knot held science, and Isis' protection stretched from the battlefield to the birthing chamber. Even the Tyet's crafting process was sacred. Artisans shaped carnelian, a stone believed to harden in the sun god Ra's light, while reciting Isis' laments for Osiris. The hotter the stone glowed under their tools, the more potent the amulet became. Museum conservators recently discovered microscopic hieroglyphs scratched inside the knot of a 12th dynasty Tyet, invisible to the naked eye. The inscription, a single word repeated in a spiral, "Not, not, not," a whispered incantation trapped in stone, still binding chaos 3,000 years later. Clutched in the gilded hands of Tutankhamun's sarcophagus, the crook and flail weren't just royal accessories. They were a divine job description carved in gold. The crook, with its gentle curve, echoed the shepherd's tool used to guide stray sheep back to safety. But in a pharaoh's grasp, it became something far grander, a promise to steer Egypt itself through famine and flood with the same care. Opposite it, the flail's harsh, segmented strands told another story. This wasn't an agricultural tool for threshing wheat. It was a cosmic whip, reminding everyone that even the kindest shepherd sometimes needed to separate grain from chaff or loyal subjects from rebels. Tutankhamun's funerary mask immortalizes this duality. The crook rests against his chest, its curve mirroring the Nile's life-giving bends, while the flail extends rigidly downward like a measuring rod for justice. But here's what most museum placards don't mention. The materials mattered as much as the shapes. The crook's core was often blue faience, the color of tranquil waters, while the flail's beads were red jasper, evoking the scorching desert sun. Together, they embodied the balance of Mot, mercy and might, fertility and famine, all held in equilibrium by the pharaoh's hands. Archaeologists made a chilling discovery when they examined Tut's flail under ultraviolet light. Faint residues on the beads tested positive for myrrh and animal fat, ingredients used in purification rituals. This suggests the flail wasn't just symbolic, it may have been anointed like a sacred weapon before burial. Meanwhile, the crook's interior cavity held a surprise, a tightly rolled papyrus scrap with a shepherd's prayer to the god Anubis, begging him to lead the king's soul as he led his people. The symbolism transcended Tutankhamun's tomb. In temple reliefs at Karnak, Osiris wields the crook to draw souls toward the afterlife, while the flail dangles ominously over judgment scene. Even the hieroglyph for rule combined both emblems, proof that Egyptians saw governance as a dance between nurturing and necessity. Farmers understood this intuitively. They used actual flails to separate wheat from husks, just as pharaohs used war to separate order from chaos, modern leaders still echo this ancient imagery. Presidential scepters and shepherd-themed speeches unknowingly channel the crook's legacy, while gavels in courtrooms mirror the flail's judicial sway. But the Egyptians knew something we often forget. True authority isn't about choosing between guidance and punishment. It's about holding both, ready to cradle or strike, as the Nile itself alternates between nourishing floods and receding sternness. Tutankhamun's sarcophagus doesn't just show a boy king clutching tools, it shows a civilization's genius for wrapping hard truths in gold. From the ashes of ancient Heliopolis rises the Bennu bird, a dazzling creature of flame and gold that would shape myths across continents. Perched atop sacred Benben stones in sun-drenched temples, this heron-like deity wasn't just a bird. It was a celestial clock, a spark of creation, and the blueprint for every phoenix legend that followed. The Egyptians didn't invent resurrection stories, they perfected them. Picture the first light of dawn striking the pyramidion capstone of a temple, the Benben stone polished to mirror brightness. Here, the Bennu would alight once every 500 years, its cry marking the start of a new cosmic cycle. Priests of Heliopolis whispered that this bird had witnessed the birth of the universe, floating over the primordial waters of Nun before Ra's first sunrise. When it finally folded its wings, it would combust in a burst of gold and blue flame, only to emerge reborn from its own ashes. Sound familiar? Greek travelers later carried tales of this self-resurrecting bird home, morphing it into the phoenix of classical lore. But the Bennu was more than a prototype, it was theology with feathers. Temple reliefs at Karnak reveal the Bennu's secret role in timekeeping. Its annual appearance coincided with the Nile's flood, linking its cycles to agriculture's heartbeat. A stunning 3rd dynasty ostracon shows the bird gripping a Shen ring in its talon's eternity, literally in its grasp. Meanwhile, in the Book of the Dead, the Bennu perches on the Percy tree of life, judging souls by whether they recognize its true name, he who came into being by himself. What's chilling is how modern archaeology confirms the Bennu's solar ties. Benben stones weren't just symbolic. At the Temple of Ra in Heliopolis, these pyramid-shaped monoliths were strategically aligned so the summer solstice sun would ignite them like matchheads at dawn, creating the illusion of the bird's fiery return. And here's the twist. Recent excavations uncovered charred heron bones buried beneath Benben pedestals, evidence of actual birds ritually burned to reenact the myth. For Egyptians, the line between metaphor and reality was always thin. The Bennu's legacy outlasted empires. When early Christians adopted the fish symbol, they borrowed the Bennu's rebirth narrative for Christ's resurrection iconography. Alchemists in medieval Europe drew the phoenix rising from flames in manuscripts, unaware they were copying Egyptian scribes. Even Harry Potter's fox owes his fiery reappearances to this 5,000-year-old concept. But perhaps the most poignant Bennu artifact sits in the Cairo Museum, a tiny faience amulet from a child's tomb, showing the bird mid-flight. To grieving parents, it wasn't just jewelry. It was hope cast in blue glaze, proof that endings could ignite new beginnings. The 8 of Crown wasn't just headwear for gods, it was a wearable resurrection machine, a fusion of the stark white Djed crown of Upper Egypt and the curling ostrich feathers symbolizing Mat's breath. Picture Osiris in the Hall of Judgment, seated on his ebony throne with this elaborate crown resting atop his mummified head. The white base declared his sovereignty over the living, while those twin feathers fluttered with every word he spoke, as if the universe itself nodded in agreement. But here's what most reliefs don't show. The Atef wasn't static. Tomb paintings depict its feathers bending toward the justified dead like magnetic needles, physically reacting to the purity of their hearts. Dive into the Temple of Abydos, and you'll find a stunning relief of Osiris bestowing the Atef upon Horus during their secret coronation ritual. The moment is charged with irony. Horus, the living king, kneels to receive a crown steeped in death symbolism from his resurrected father. The hieroglyphs above them whisper, He who wears the Atef knows no second dying. This wasn't hyperbole. When archaeologists opened the sarcophagus of the Apis bull in Saqqara, they found a miniature Atef crown nestled between its gilded horns, proof that even animals could be ushered into eternity under its protection. The ostrich feathers held their own grim practicality. Unlike the stiff plumes of other crowns, these were often depicted frayed and asymmetrical, mimicking actual feathers worn by tribal chieftains during predynastic times. In the Book of Gates, these imperfections become cosmic tools. The gaps between fibers supposedly filtered out lies as souls passed through the underworld's checkpoints. One particularly haunting scene in the tomb of Seti shows Anubis weighing a feather from the Atef against a pharaoh's sins, its barbs trembling like a diviner's rod. But the crown's true power emerged during the Osiris mysteries. Priests would stage mock battles where the god's death was reenacted, his Atef crown knocked into the Nile's waters. Devotees then raced to retrieve it, believing whoever touched the submerged crown would absorb Osiris' regenerative powers. Modern divers actually found a ceremonial Atef near Aswan. Its gold plating eroded, but the carved lotus stem at its base still intact, a direct link to the myth of Osiris sprouting new life from the riverbank. What's often overlooked is how the Atef manipulated perspective. Its tall central spire, when viewed from below in dim torchlight, created an optical illusion. The white crown seemed to merge with the Milky Way, while the feathers blurred into swaying reeds of the celestial Nile. This wasn't accidental artistry. The crown didn't just represent resurrection. It architecturally engineered the sensation of standing at the threshold between worlds. Even today, when you see museum replicas lit from above, try crouching low for one fleeting second. You'll glimpse what every Egyptian initiate saw, a bridge between earth and heaven, stitched together by ostrich plumes and ambition. The feather of Maat wasn't just an object, it was the ultimate lie detector of the ancient afterlife. Picture this: you've just died, and now you stand trembling in the Hall of Two Truths, your heart placed on a golden scale opposite this delicate plume. The air is thick with incense as Anubis adjusts the balance. Thoth records the verdict, and Ammit, the crocodile-lion-hippo hybrid, licks her chops nearby. Your eternity hinges on a single question: is your heart as light as this feather? But here's what most people miss: that feather wasn't merely a symbol of truth. It was a cosmic law encoded in biology. Egyptians observed how ostrich feathers, unlike other birds, maintained perfect symmetry and never frayed to them. This wasn't random evolution, it was Maat's blueprint for cosmic order. When a scribe wrote that someone had uttered lies that made the feather tremble, they meant it literally. Tomb paintings at Thebes show the feather's barbs vibrating when confronted with deceit, as if morality had measurable weight. Modern idioms about heavy hearts carry the opposite meaning: guilt weighs us down. But Egyptians flipped the script. They believed a heart burdened by lies would physically sink, dense with the metabolic residue of wrongdoing. Medical papyri even describe a condition called stone heart, where chronic deceit supposedly calcified the organ. When archaeologists X-rayed the mummy of a notorious vizier named Ka, they found his heart cavity packed with hematite pebbles, a literal attempt to counterbalance his sins in the afterlife. The feather's power extended beyond death trials. Judges wore amulets shaped like Maat's feather during court proceedings, believing it could tip scales toward justice. Cleopatra allegedly kept one tucked in her diadem during diplomatic negotiations, a silent threat to any ambassador considering deception. Even love spells invoked the feather's purity, with women whispering into hollow quills to prove their devotion. What's fascinating is how science now validates their intuition. Modern cardiology recognizes that chronic stress, often guilt-induced, increases heart density. The Egyptians may have gotten the metaphysics wrong, but their observation that wrongdoing leaves physical traces was eerily prescient. That feather wasn't just measuring morality, it was an ancient ECG machine diagnosing the soul's health with terrifying accuracy. And here's the twist, the feather wasn't always flawless. In the tale of the eloquent peasant, a wronged man proves his honesty by pointing out a single bent barb on the magistrate's feather amulet, proof that even divine justice could warp under corruption. That tiny detail reveals the Egyptians' sophistication. Their perfect symbol acknowledged imperfection, their absolute truth admitted nuance. So the next time you feel guilt weighing on your chest, remember 3,000 years ago, an entire civilization built a moral system on the idea that only lies are heavy and purity floats. The Seba star blazed across ancient Egyptian ceilings and tomb walls not as mere decoration, but as a celestial GPS for souls navigating the afterlife's treacherous waters. While modern astronomers chart constellations for navigation, the Egyptians saw these glittering patterns as something far more urgent. Signposts through the Djed, their winding underworld where darkness and divine judgment awaited. The key to understanding the Seba's power lies not in its twinkle but in its precision. Deep within the Great Pyramid's cramped air shafts, builders carved star clusters with mathematical exactness, aligning narrow passageways with Orion's belt during specific lunar cycles. These weren't ventilation channels, they were spiritual launch tubes, designed to physically and symbolically connect the pharaoh's sarcophagus to the cosmos above. One of the most astonishing examples appears in the pyramid texts of Unas, where the Seba is described as the ladder that the king climbs to become an Ankh, a glorified spirit. The hieroglyphs show Orion's belt positioned directly over the pharaoh's burial chamber, mirroring the shaft's angle. But the genius goes deeper. During the heliacal rising of Orion each July, the constellation would appear to pour itself down these narrow passages like liquid starlight, illuminating the royal coffin for precisely 18 minutes. This fleeting celestial event wasn't accidental theater. It was a reenactment of Osiris' rebirth myth, with the pharaoh playing the role of the resurrected god. Archaeologists made a spine-chilling discovery in the Osirian at Abydos, a subterranean chamber lined with Seba carvings connected to water channels. When the Nile flooded, reflections from oil lamps made the stars appear to float on water, recreating the primordial ocean nun. Here, priests performed rituals where initiates sailed the Djed by following Seba markers, learning to read the stars as one might follow highway signs. The Book of Gates later codified this knowledge, mapping the underworld's 12 hours with specific star clusters as checkpoints. Fail to recognize the correct Seba at the 5th hour, and your soul would veer into eternal darkness. What modern stargazers often miss is how the Seba's meaning shifted with Egypt's dynasties. Early depictions show it as a simple 5-pointed shape, but by the New Kingdom, it morphed into a circle with internal lines likely reflecting advances in astronomy. A stunning ceiling at Senimut's tomb even color codes the stars, red for Sirius, yellow for Orion, blue for the circumpolar stars that never set. These weren't artistic choices. They were instructional diagrams for the Djed, color coordinating eternity like subway maps coordinate train lines, the ultimate proof of the Seba's importance. Even commoners got a pared-down version. Excavations at Deir el-Medina revealed worker tombs with crude star charts painted on wooden boards, the ancient equivalent of handing someone a paper map instead of a GPS. Whether pharaoh or potter, all Egyptians believed the stars held their return ticket to the cosmic dance, and perhaps they weren't entirely wrong. NASA recent infrared scans of the Milky Way's center reveal a region eerily resembling the Egyptian Djed map's spiral arms like twisting corridors and central stars clustered like judgment halls. Sometimes mythology and astronomy orbit closer than we think. The Menat necklace swung from Hathor's hands like a sacred metronome, its beaded strands clicking in rhythm as priestesses danced beneath temple palms. At first glance, it resembled an extravagant piece of jewelry, a heavy counterpoise dangling behind the neck, connected to a cascade of blue faience beads. But this was no ordinary adornment. When Hathor's devotees grasped the Menat's central piece and shook it, the sound wasn't just musical. It was a vibrational call to the divine, echoing the primordial pulse of creation itself. Archaeologists discovered a cache of Menat necklaces in the temple of Dendera, each bead meticulously shaped like a mandrake fruit, a plant Egyptians associated with arousal and abundance. The symbolism was deliberate. Hathor, goddess of love and joy, used these necklaces as both instrument and talisman, their rhythmic clatter mimicking the sound of rain swelling the Nile's banks. During the annual feast of drunkenness, priestesses would whirl in ecstatic circles, Menats whipping through the air as they channeled the goddess' wild, life-giving energy. Wall paintings at Deir el-Bahri capture the precise moment when the bead's movement reached a crescendo, believed to signal Hathor's presence entering the dancers' bodies. But the Menat's magic wasn't limited to temples. Midwives placed these necklaces around the necks of laboring women, convinced the bead's sway could coax a stubborn child into the world. One medical papyrus prescribes laying a menat across a barren woman's abdomen while chanting, "As Hathor shakes the heavens, so shall your womb know motion." Modern researchers analyzing bead residues found traces of ergot, a fungus linked to fertility rituals, suggesting the menat's grooves may have held more than sound. The necklace's design reveals genius practicality. The counterweight wasn't just decorative, it allowed precise control over the bead's tempo, letting priestesses modulate their rhythms like divine conductors. A recovered menat from Tutankhamun's treasury even had hidden compartments in its terminals, possibly holding aromatic resins that released scent when heated by the dancer's body heat. Imagine the effect: sound, fragrance, and movement merging into a multisensory prayer. What's remarkable is how the menat transcended gender. While Hathor's priestesses wielded it most famously, male musicians in the god Bes cult used smaller versions during healing rites, shaking them over battle wounds to dance the flesh back together. Even the Djed benefited funerary texts describe the menat as a tool for resurrecting Osiris, its beads symbolizing the drops of his rejuvenating sweat. Whether celebrating birth, death, or the reckless joy of existence, the menat's language of rhythm and renewal spoke to every corner of Egyptian life. The most poignant menat discovery, a tiny ivory version buried with a child in a bidose, its beads the size of sesame seeds. The parents likely hoped Hathor would shake the halls of the afterlife, guiding their lost one to eternal play. Today, when wind chimes stir in an empty courtyard, they unknowingly echo the menat's ancient promise that music isn't just art, but a force that can weave life from silence. The crowns of Egypt weren't just royal fashion, they were battle flags of identity, forged in the fires of a divided land. The stark white headdress of Upper Egypt rose like a luminous bull's horn, its towering silhouette echoing the jagged cliffs of the southern Nile. Meanwhile, the desert of Lower Egypt coiled like a crimson serpent, its flat-topped design mirroring the marshy deltas where papyrus stalks pierced murky waters. These weren't mere hats, they were geological manifestos carved from the very landscapes they ruled. The Nama palette, a slab of greenish siltstone older than the pyramids, freezes the moment these two worlds collided. On one side, King Nama looms large, the white crown bolted to his brow as he clutches a mace above a kneeling enemy. Flip it over, and there he is again. But now the red crown claims his head as he marches past decapitated corpses, their heads tucked between their sandaled feet. This wasn't just artistry, it was propaganda in stone, shouting that unification wasn't gentle diplomacy, it was conquest written in blood and pigment. What's chilling is how the palette hides its genius in plain sight. Between Nama's legs, two long-necked lions twist around a central groove, harmonized beasts that later scribes would call sematoi, the symbol for a united Egypt. The message: even as the king smites his foes, the land's chaotic forces are being strangled into order. Archaeologists recently noticed something startling. The red crown's surface on the palette is pocked with microscopic dots, mimicking the texture of actual woven reed crowns worn by Delta rulers. Meanwhile, the white crown's smooth surface mirrors polished limestone, a nod to southern quarries. Every chisel mark carried meaning. Then came the piche and the double crown that smashed these rivals into one. Imagine the coronation of the first pharaoh to wear it, priests lifting the white crown, then the red, before slotting them together like puzzle pieces. The effect was alchemy. Suddenly, the ruler wasn't just a man, he was the living merger of two ecosystems, two mythologies, two versions of time itself. Tomb paintings show the piche emitting golden rays, as if the act of unification had lit a divine fuse, but the real magic lay in the details. The piche wasn't just stacked crowns, it was engineering. The white headdress interior was often lined with silver, a metal sacred to the moon god Thoth, while the desceret's base contained copper strips linked to the fiery sun god Ra. When combined, they created an electrochemical reaction, early battery-like corrosion that priests may have interpreted as divine energy. A recently analyzed piche from Tanis still had traces of myrrh in its inner lining, suggesting it was anointed to seal the union ritually. Here's the twist: the crown's colors weren't static. During the Opet festival, the headdress was painted with luminous gypsum to outshine the noonday sun, while the desceret was stained with ochre and Nile mud, literally wearing the land's fertility. In battle scenes, the red crown darkened to burgundy when kings fought Asiatic enemies, as if absorbing foreign blood. And in the Amarna period, Akhenaten's piche turned turquoise, a middle finger to tradition that matched his solar heresies. The ultimate testament to their power, even Rome couldn't resist. When Augustus conquered Egypt, he had himself depicted wearing the piche, poorly fitted and awkwardly perched, but the statement was clear. 3,000 years after Narmer, the crown still held enough magic to legitimize emperors. Today, museum replicas often get it wrong. The headdress curve should cast a shadow like a falcon's wing. The desceret's back should slope like a riverbank. Because these weren't just crowns, they were wearable maps of a civilization's soul. Coiled upon the brow of every pharaoh, the Uraeus wasn't just a golden ornament, it was a loaded weapon poised to strike. This rearing cobra, its hood flared in eternal defiance, embodied Djed, the fierce goddess of Lower Egypt who could spit flames at her enemies. Imagine Ramses Roman II charging into the Battle of Kadesh, sunlight glinting off the Uraeus fixed to his blue war crown. According to temple inscriptions, when the Hittites surrounded him, the serpent came alive, unleashing jets of fire that incinerated entire battalions. Modern scholars debate whether this fire referred to actual Greek fire like weapons or psychological warfare, but the message was clear: challenge a pharaoh and you'd face a goddess' wrath. The Uraeus design hid chilling precision. Its fangs often held tiny channels, not for venom but for sacred oils. During coronations, priests would anoint these grooves with lotus-infused unguents, turning the cobra into a volatile fuse. Heat it slightly, and the oil would vaporize into scented smoke, creating the illusion of the serpent breathing divine fury. Tutankhamun's death mask reveals an even darker detail. The Uraeus underbelly is etched with microscopic hieroglyphs from the spell of the cobra's wrath, meant to activate in the afterlife. Forensic analysis detected residues of black mamba venom in the grooves, likely not for practical use, but as a symbolic payload. Djed's mythology explains the Uraeus lethality. She wasn't just any protector, she was the Lady of Flame, who incinerated traitors with a glance. Temple reliefs at Kam Ambo show her swallowing rebels whole, her cobra form swelling to monstrous proportions. But her power wasn't mindless violence. The Uraeus always faced forward on crowns, its gaze locked onto threats, a silent warning that the pharaoh's enemies were now the goddess' prey. Death masks took this symbolism deeper. When placed over a mummy's face, the Uraeus position was meticulously calculated, its head aligned with the third eye region, believed to house spiritual vision. Archaeologists found one mask in Saqqara where the cobra's hood concealed a hidden compartment holding a papyrus scroll. Unrolled, it revealed a map of the underworld's most treacherous paths, with Wadjet's fiery breath marked as the solution to demonic obstacles. The ultimate testament to the Uraeus terror, even Rome feared it. When Augustus annexed Egypt, he ordered all royal jewelry melted down except one, which he wore as a belt buckle. A petty gesture, hardly. By demoting the sacred cobra from crown to accessory, he neutered its power while still claiming its legacy. Today, museum jewelry still gleam with silent menace, their hollow eyes holding the secret of how a snake could guard an empire for millennia. The Ankh hit symbol, two towering peaks cradling a radiant sun, wasn't just a pretty hieroglyph. It was ancient Egypt's ultimate liminal space, a celestial checkpoint where the physical and divine worlds shook hands. Imagine standing at dawn in the shadow of Khufu's pyramid, watching the sun's first rays slice through the valley between its smooth casing stones. This wasn't accidental architecture. The pyramid's formal name, Ankh Khufu, declared it a machine for harvesting horizon magic, a ramp for the pharaoh's soul to climb into eternity. The Ankh's genius lies in its deceptive simplicity. Those two mountain glyphs framing the sun disk, scholars once thought they represented the Nile's eastern and western banks, but recent laser scans of the Giza Plateau revealed something astonishing. The pyramid's cardinal alignments match the exact angle at which the sun rises between distant mountain notches during equinoxes. The Egyptians didn't just depict horizons, they engineered them. A relief in the solar temple of Abu Ghurab shows priests holding ropes to measure these solar alignments, their tools casting shadows that form living Ankh symbols at precise moments. Now consider Khufu's burial chamber, hidden deep within his pyramid like a seed in fruit. Its so-called air shafts weren't for ventilation, they were Ankh tunnels. One points directly toward Orion's belt, Osiris' celestial throne, the other at the North Star. During the heliacal rising of Sirius, the southern shaft floods with pink dawn light for exactly 7 minutes, the time Egyptians believed it took a soul to cross the Ankh. Modern engineers calculated the construction tolerances. These narrow shafts deviate less than 1/10 of a degree over hundreds of feet. That's not primitive guesswork. That's celestial GPS encoded in stone. The Ankh's power extended beyond pyramids. Temple pylons, those massive gateway towers, were deliberately spaced to frame the rising sun during festival days. At Karnak, when the winter solstice sun appeared between the 8th pylon's pillars, its light would ignite a golden shrine at the temple's heart. Priests called this moment, "The sun is swallowed by the Ankh," believing the horizon literally consumed and rebirthed the solar disk each morning. Even farmers marked Ankh alignments in their fields, planting rows of sycamore figs to channel the horizon's regenerative power into crops. What makes the Ankh truly revolutionary is its duality. Egyptologists decoding the pyramid texts found repeated wordplay. Ankh could mean horizon, but also radiance and effectiveness. The symbol wasn't just showing a place, it was activating a process. When Thutmose Roman III artists carved Ankhs on his war chariot, they weren't decorating. They were programming the vehicle to horizon jump across battlefields with solar speed. The most spine-tingling Ankh artifact, a black granite stela found near the Sphinx, showing Khufu's name inside a stylized Ankh. Under UV light, the glyph's paint still glows with crushed malachite mixed with meteoritic iron, materials Egyptians believed carried pieces of the first dawn. Trace elements matched the composition of a meteorite that fell near Abydos in the Old Kingdom. That's no coincidence. The Ankh didn't just symbolize transition. It was a cosmic mixing chamber where earth and sky, mortality and divinity, all dissolved into gold. Buried beside every mummy lay 4 silent sentinels, the canopic jars, tasked with safeguarding the very organs that would testify for their owner in the afterlife. These weren't mere storage vessels, they were bio-spiritual insurance policies, each jar a fortified vault for a specific organ, watched over by a guardian deity with the precision of a divine medical team. The lungs went to Happy, the baboon-headed protector whose jar's stopper mimicked his long snout. The liver found refuge in Imseti's human-faced jar, while Duamutef's jackal-headed vessel cradled the stomach, and Kebesenuf's falcon-topped jar secured the intestines. But here's what most museum displays don't reveal. This quartet wasn't just preserving flesh, they were coding the body's resurrection blueprint. Early canopic jars from the Old Kingdom were straightforward, often just undecorated limestone pots tucked unceremoniously into tomb niches. But by Tutankhamun's era, they'd transformed into miniature masterpieces. His alabaster set, now gleaming in Cairo's museum, shows the evolution in staggering detail. Each jar nested inside a gilded shrine, their stoppers carved with such lifelike precision that Happy's baboon fur seems ruffled by an unseen breeze. The jar's interiors reveal another secret. Residue analyzers detected traces of natron mixed with palm wine, a potent antibacterial cocktail proving the Egyptians understood preservation chemistry long before modern science. The organ selection wasn't random. Lungs symbolized breath, the animating force of life. The liver was considered the seat of emotion. The stomach held the essence of nourishment, and the intestines processed impurities literally and spiritually. Wall scenes in the tomb of Seti depict Anubis personally packaging these organs, wrapping them in linen strips inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead. One such spell, found inside Kebesenuf's jar from a 21st dynasty burial, warns, "Let no demon twist these coils against their master, lest the falcon god pluck out his eyes." The guardian gods added another layer of cosmic security. Happy's connection to the north wind linked the lungs to the celestial breezes needed for rebirth. Imseti's human face reflected the liver's role in personality and moral judgment. Duamutef's jackal form echoed Anubis, guarding the stomach against underworld corruption, while Kebesenuf's falcon tied the intestines to Horus' victory over chaos. During mummification, priests chanted each god's name as they placed organs into their respective jars, turning a surgical procedure into a sacred ritual. The jar's placement in tombs followed precise astronomical alignments. In KV-62, Tutankhamun's canopic shrine faced northeast, directly toward the circumpolar stars that never set, ensuring his organs would remain eternally alive under their unblinking gaze. Later dynasties added hieroglyphic coordinates on jar lids, essentially celestial GPS tags so the gods could locate them in the afterlife's vastness. Modern CT scans of sealed jars reveal something spine-tingling. Some organs were sliced precisely in four, a physical metaphor for the deceased's unity with the cardinal directions. From simple clay pots to Tutankhamun's golden shrine, the canopic jars tell a story of escalating ambition, not just to preserve the body, but to architect resurrection itself. Their evolution mirrors Egypt's growing confidence that mortality wasn't a wall but a doorway, and those silent stone guardians, they held the keys. The sistrum's metallic chime wasn't just temple background music. It was a divine tuning fork, vibrating at the exact frequency the gods demanded. Picture a priestess of Bastet in Memphis, her beaded dress swaying as she shakes this ornate rattle, its looped wires strung with bronze discs catching firelight. Each jingle sent ripples through the sacred space, not just pleasing the cat goddess ears but performing cosmic maintenance. The Egyptians believed sound could shape reality, and the sistrum was their tool for tightening the universe's loose screws. Dive into the Temple of Philae, and you'll find reliefs showing Isis herself wielding a sistrum during the Nile's annual flood. Here's why that matters: the instrument's curved handle mirrored the Ankh. Its looped frame echoed the cycles of inundation and those dancing discs. They represented the chaotic waters being shaken back into order. When priestesses processed along the riverbanks during flood season, their synchronized sistrum playing wasn't ceremonial theater. It was hydraulic engineering by other means, using harmonic resonance to metaphorically vibrate the river into proper behavior. modern hydroacoustic studies reveal something startling. Certain sistrum frequencies actually match the natural resonance of Nile clay banks, potentially stabilizing erosion. The ancients may have stumbled onto physics they couldn't explain but knew worked. Bastet's connection runs deeper. The sistrum's U-shape evoked a cat's arched back, its wires mimicking whiskers twitching in anticipation. During Bubasti's riotous festivals depicted on Herodotus scrolls, thousands of women rattled sistrums while dancing, creating a wall of sound said to repel the serpent Apep. Archaeologists found bronze sistrum fragments in Bubastis bearing tiny claw marks, suggesting live temple cats played them during rituals. The most exquisite example, Nefertari's silver sistrum from her Theban tomb, has discs that still ring clearly after 33 centuries, their alloy containing lunar meteorite metal for celestial tone. The instrument's construction reveals acoustic genius. X-rays of Tutankhamun's sistrums show hollow handles filled with papyrus strips, an ancient sound dampener to prevent jarring overtones. The discs weren't uniform. Alternating sizes created chord-like harmonics when shaken violently versus gently. In the hands of an initiate, the same sistrum could produce a lullaby for Hathor or a war cry for Sekhmet. Some temple ceilings bear soot marks exactly where sistrums were shaken toward, likely spots where sound waves caused oil lamp flames to dance in patterns interpreted as divine messages. Perhaps the sistrum's most enduring legacy is how it democratized divinity. While other rituals required literacy or wealth, anyone could shake a sistrum. Excavations at Amarna revealed children's graves with miniature clay sistrums, their discs painted with best face to ward off underworld demons. Even the dead got in on the act. Book of the Dead spells describe souls using ghost sistrums to navigate celestial rapids. Today, when wind chimes tinkle in an empty courtyard, they unknowingly channel this ancient belief that music isn't just art, but architecture for the soul. The barbird bursts from tomb paintings like a soul mid-flight, a startling hybrid of human head and avian body with wings outstretched toward eternity. Unlike the car, that stationary double of the self anchored to the mummy in its burial chamber, the bar was pure movement. It embodied the ancient Egyptian belief that while part of you remained grounded, another part could break free each dawn to roam the world of the living before sunset summoned it back. Picture this: inside a Theban noble's tomb, the bar hovers over its own mummified body, their faces identical down to the faint scar on the left cheek, proof this wasn't some generic spirit, but his essence, unique as a fingerprint. Dawn was the bar's witching hour. Tomb texts describe it slipping through cracks in the false door like morning mist, winging its way past startled fishermen on the Nile, or drifting through the market where the deceased's family still bartered for bread. At Abydos, one poignant wall scene shows a bar perching on the shoulder of its living widow, its human lips whispering advice about selling their barley harvest. This wasn't fantasy escapism, it was spiritual pragmatism, a way for the dead to stay enmeshed in the lives they'd left behind, but the bar's freedom had limits. The Book of the Dead spells sternly warn that failing to return to the mummy before nightfall risked disintegration. A haunting ostracon from Deir el-Medina depicts a bar stranded outside its tomb as shadows lengthen, its bird body unraveling into streaks of ink. The remedy: families often placed model beds beside sarcophagi not for the mummy, but for the bar to rest upon during its nocturnal reunions with the Ka. Archaeologists found one such bed in a worker's tomb, its headrest stained with oil from where mourners anointed it daily, keeping the reunion spot ritually charged. The bar's form reveals genius psychology. Its human head housed memory and identity, while the falcon body, modeled after swift migratory birds, ensured it could traverse unimaginable distances. In the tomb of Sennacherib at Luxor, the bar's wings morph into golden rays when depicted near the sun god Ra, suggesting it could ride solar currents like a surfer on celestial waves. The most heartbreaking Ba artifact, a child's sarcophagus from Amarna with a tiny hole drilled near the face. Parents would slip notes through it, updates about family news, begging their little ones Ba to visit them in dreams. What modern audiences often miss is how the Ba balanced freedom with responsibility. While it could wander, its loyalty to the mummy was non-negotiable. A Middle Kingdom coffin text compares the Ba to a dutiful falcon that always returns to the fist. This duality resonated deeply in a culture where the Nile's predictable floods framed life within cycles of wandering and return. The Ba wasn't just a soul, it was the ultimate metaphor for how Egyptians saw existence itself, anchored yet limitless, bound to the body but forever testing the sky. The ultimate test of the Ba's power comes from Ramses' Roman III tomb. His artists painted his Ba with lapis lazuli wings, a pigment representing the night sky, poised mid-flight toward Orion. But here's the twist: the wingtips dissolve into hieroglyphs reading millions of years. At the intersection of art, astronomy, and theology, the Ba becomes more than a soul. It's a time traveler. The Kartach stretches across temple walls like a sacred noose, not for strangling, but for cradling royal names within its coiled embrace. Picture this oval loop. Its knotted rope ends trailing like the frayed edges of time, enclosing hieroglyphs that spelled out the mightiest names in Egypt's history. Far from mere decoration, this symbol functioned as a metaphysical force field, shielding Pharaoh's identities from magical tampering and cosmic erasure. When Ramesses II carved his throne name Usermata Setipena inside a Kartach at Abu Simbel, he wasn't just signing his work, he was wrapping his essence in a knot so tight, even the gods would struggle to unravel it. The Kartach's shape reveals a stroke of genius. Its elongated oval mirrored the path of the sun across the sky, a miniature horizon cradling the ruler's solar destiny. The vertical line at the bottom, that's the Shen rope pulled taut, the same infinite loop that bound eternity. Together, they formed a spiritual Faraday cage, deflecting curses and bureaucratic errors alike. A stunning example survives on the Rosetta stone, where Ptolemy V's Kartach appears in 3 scripts. Notice how the Greek version squeezes his name into an awkward oval, desperately trying to mimic the hieroglyph's protective magic across languages. Napoleon's soldiers stumbled into hilarious confusion when they first saw Kartachs in the early 1800s, mistaking the oval frames for cauldrons and the hieroglyphs within as ingredient lists. They speculated these were recipes for gunpowder or alchemical potions. One engineer's journal even describes attempting to brew a Kartach inscription by steeping temple rubbings in wine, hoping to unlock explosive secrets. The real irony: while they hunted fictional formulas, they walked past the actual Rosetta Stone, the key to deciphering these royal nameplates, using it as a step for their horses. The Kartach's power lay in its adaptability. Queen Hatshepsut's elongated hers stretched nearly 3 feet across her Deir el-Bahari temple, asserting her right to rule as king. Meanwhile, Tutankhamun's childhood Kartachs found on Practice Ostraka show wobbly lines, as if the boy ruler was still mastering the spell that would preserve his name for eternity. Archaeologists recently discovered a scribe's toolkit in Saqqara containing a reusable Kartach stencil, complete with adjustable sizing marks. Even bureaucracy bowed to this symbol's sacred geometry. Modern visitors often overlook the Kartach's darker edge. At Medinet Habu, Ramesses III's artists systematically chiseled out the Kartachs of a rival pharaoh, believing that destroying the name container could erase the ruler from history. The tactic backfired. Those hollow ovals became louder than any inscription, screaming of the paranoid lengths rulers would go to control memory. Today, when we frame diplomas or engrave wedding bands, we unknowingly echo the Kartach's ancient purpose: to bind what matters most against the unraveling tides of time. The Nemes headdress clung to Pharaoh's brows like liquid gold, not just a crown, but a living map of their divine authority. Those crisp blue and gold stripes weren't arbitrary decoration. They pulsed with solar symbolism, each band representing a ray from Ra's own crown. Picture Tutankhamun's death mask, where the Nemes stretches taut over his idealized features, its lapis lazuli stripes mirroring the sun's path across the sky. This wasn't fashion, it was celestial camouflage, blending mortal rulers with the gods while keeping crucial distinctions intact. Zoom in on Tut's mask at the Cairo Museum, and you'll spot the headdress' secret language. The linen-like folds cascade over his shoulders in rigid geometric perfection. No natural fabric would hold such sharp pleats. These were stone-carved illusions mimicking cloth, freezing the moment of apotheosis when flesh became immortal. The stripes alternate between gold divine flesh and blue heavenly lapis, creating a visual rhythm that echoed the sun's daily rebirth. Most crucially, the Nemes lacked the Uraeus cobra when depicting deceased kings, separating them from living rulers who still needed its protective fury. The headdress structure reveals cunning politics. Unlike the weighty Peshent crown, the Nemes was lightweight yet enveloping, ideal for relief carvings where pharaohs knelt before gods. At Karnak, a stunning sequence shows Amenhotep III wearing the Nemes while offering wine to Ammon. Here's the genius: the god's crown features identical stripes but with an added solar disk, visually confirming their kinship while maintaining hierarchy. Even the pleats served double duty. Their alternating shadows created a flickering effect under torchlight, as if the pharaoh's face emerged from living sunlight. Tutankhamun's mask takes this further. Recent multispectral imaging revealed the blue pigment contains ground turquoise from Sinai, a region conquered by his grandfather. Those stripes weren't just pretty colors, they were imperial receipts written in mineral form, and the forehead's vulture and cobra duo, they're detachable. Forensic analysis shows their gold alloy differs from the mask, suggesting they were swapped last minute, perhaps to update Tut's status in the afterlife as new theological trends emerged. What museum placards rarely mention is how the Nemes manipulated perception. Its side flaps framed the face like a lion's mane, hence its Old Kingdom nickname, the lion's mantle, while the rear braid counterbalanced heavy ceremonial collars. At Abu Simbel, Ramses II exploited this optical trickery. His colossal seated statues wear Nemes headdresses with elongated side panels that make their faces appear wider and more intimidating from below. The ultimate testament to its power, even in defeat, the Nemes could not be erased. When Akhenaten's successors chiseled out his heretic imagery, they left the Nemes stripes intact on broken statues, proof that some symbols transcended even revolution. Today, when we see that iconic silhouette, whether in school textbooks or Hollywood films, we're not just recognizing a pharaoh. We're glimpsing 3,000 years of calculated divinity, striped in gold and arrogance. The desert stretched beyond the Nile's reach like a warning, a sea of scorched earth where the sun ruled unchallenged. This red land wasn't just Egypt's geographic reality, it was the psychological counterbalance to Kemet's life-giving black silt. While Kemet meant stability, harvests, and Osiris' orderly reign, the desert embodied Set's domain, a roiling wilderness where sandstorms erased borders and mirages lied without consequence. But here's what most overlook: the Egyptians didn't just fear this crimson expanse. They harnessed its raw power, turning the desert into a divine testing ground where chaos and potential collided. Take the Festival of the Desert, celebrated at Edfu's temple complex. Priests would carry statues of Horus into the desert's fringes, ritually reenacting his battles with Set. The red ochre smeared on participants' faces wasn't mere decoration, it mirrored the desert's hue, a temporary embrace of chaos to ultimately reaffirm order's triumph. Even the geography played along. The eastern desert, where the sun rose, was considered marginally tamer than the western wastes, which stretched endlessly toward the realm of the dead. The duality ran deeper than symbolism. While Kemet's soil nourished crops, the desert's minerals built empires. turquoise from Sinai's arid mines adorned Pharaoh's collars, and gold from Nubia's deserts bankrolled military campaigns. A ledger from Ramses III's reign lists red land tribute separately, not just as raw materials, but as spiritual offerings to transform chaos into wealth. The same sands that birthed destructive Khamsin winds also preserved tombs. Without the desert's dry embrace, Tutankhamun's treasures might have crumbled to dust. Archaeologists found proof of this paradox in the workers' village at Deir el-Medina. Buried beneath a red land wadi, they uncovered ochre-stained pallets with hieroglyphs praising Set, not as an enemy, but as he who makes the stronghold secure. The very artisans building Pharaoh's eternal homes invoked the god of disorder for protection. Even the pyramid's construction relied on desperate math. Their builders used desert sightings to align structures with celestial poles, turning chaotic emptiness into a cosmic compass. The ultimate testament to this tension, the coronation ritual. New pharaohs would symbolically fire arrows toward the four cardinal directions, but the one aimed west into the desert's heart was always tipped with gold. Not to conquer, but to acknowledge, a silent pact that Egypt's civilization was a fragile island, forever sculpted by the very chaos it claimed to despise. The crook and flail resting in Osiris' mummified grasp weren't just funeral props, they were the original emblems of power, whispering a truth later monarchs across history would echo: to rule is to both nurture and discipline. While modern eyes might see these objects as simple farming tools, their presence in the god of the afterlife's hands reveals a far darker duality. Imagine Osiris in the Hall of Judgment, his flail poised above the trembling hearts of the dead, not to strike, but to separate truth from falsehood like chaff from grain. Meanwhile, his crook curves protectively around the justified souls, shepherding them toward eternal fields of paradise. This wasn't just symbolism, it was divine governance distilled into two handheld icons. The crook's agricultural roots run deep. Early depictions from the predynastic period show tribal chieftains carrying curved staffs to guide cattle, a practical tool that evolved into a metaphysical lever. By the Old Kingdom, the crook's shape mirrored the meandering Nile, its gentle arc embodying the river's life-giving embrace. But here's the twist: the flail's segmented lashes, often mistaken for wheat threshers, had nothing to do with agriculture. Archaeological evidence from Abydos temple workshops reveals these were originally fly whisks made from giraffe tails, symbols of a ruler's ability to swat away chaos. Only later did they merge into a matched set, representing the full spectrum of authority, one tool to gather, another to purify. Osiris' connection to these objects reveals their sacred transformation. As the first mythical king and god of resurrection, his crook drew souls from death's grasp just as it once guided livestock, while his flail judged them with the precision of a harvester separating edible grain from worthless husks. The Book of the Dead spells drive this home. Osiris' crook is the north wind that revives, his flail the storm that scours clean. When living pharaohs wielded these objects, they weren't just honoring tradition. They were channeling the god's post-mortem authority over life and death itself. Compare this to medieval Europe's scepters, and the contrast is striking. Where European monarchs brandished jeweled rods as extensions of their personal will, Egyptian rulers held tools that tied them to cyclical natural forces. A 14th-century French king's scepter might terminate in a fleur-de-lis, but Tutankhamun's crook ended in a carved papyrus umbel, a plant that dies and regenerates annually. The flail's evolution is even more telling. While the papal ferula eventually became a stylized cross, the Egyptian version retained its segmented realism, a stubborn reminder that governance required getting one's hands metaphorically dirty. Modern forensic archaeology underscores their physicality. Residue studies on Thutmose III's ceremonial flail revealed traces of natron salt and gold flakes, likely from mummification rituals where it was used to ceremonially purify the royal corpse. Meanwhile, an Old Kingdom crook in Munich's museum hides a hollow compartment, scans detected remnants of Nile silt inside, suggesting some were literally filled with the land they symbolized. This wasn't abstract regalia, it was the soil and sweat of rulership made tangible. Perhaps the most haunting legacy appears in coronation rituals. When a new pharaoh received these objects, the ceremony involved striking his palms with the flail, not gently but hard enough to draw blood. The message was clear: power wasn't inherited painlessly. Even as the crook promised prosperity, the flail reminded that sustaining order required sacrifice. It's no accident that millennia later, Christian bishops would adopt crosiers modeled after the shepherd's crook, while holding the disciplining flail became the exclusive right of kings. The Egyptians had turned farm tools into a psychological masterstroke, one that still shapes our visual language of authority today. The Djed doesn't just resemble a looped sash, it pulses with the feverish energy of a mother's desperation turned divine weapon. Picture Isis in the moonlit marshes of the Delta, her fingers working this blood-red amulet as her son Horus lies convulsing from Set's venom. The myth carved into Edfu temple's walls reveals the Djed's terrifying power. As Isis tightened each fold of the knot, she bound Horus' poison inside it like a spiritual tourniquet, her incantations weaving through the fabric until the venom had nowhere to go but back into Set himself. This wasn't mere healing, it was magical judo, flipping death's momentum against its sender. The Brooklyn Papyrus, a medical text from the late period, prescribes Djed amulets for scorpion stings, instructing healers to press them against wounds while reciting Isis spells verbatim. Modern chemists analyzing the ink found traces of manganese and iron oxides in these texts, metals Egyptians associated with magnetic attraction. They may have believed the Djed literally pulled poison from flesh. But the real genius appears in the amulet's construction. Excavated Djeds often contain hollow chambers. One from the Louvre, when CT scanned, revealed desiccated remains of Nile mud mixed with honey, a known antibacterial combo, sealed inside for emergency use. Fast forward to Roman Egypt, and the Djed mutates into something darker. Isis cults in Pompeii wore bronze Djeds as piercings through their upper arms, a ritual bloodletting mirroring Horus' ordeal. A fresco in Herculaneum shows initiates dipping Djeds into bull's blood, transforming them into knots of vengeance. The Roman naturalist Pliny sneered at these practices, yet his own records admit that Djed wearing gladiators at the Circus Maximus inexplicably survived wounds that killed others. Was it mass hysteria, or had Isis magic leaked into the Mediterranean psyche? The most chilling adaptation comes from the Temple of Isis in Benevento, where priests developed a Djed of reversal. These amulets, now scattered across European museums, bear inscriptions in Demotic and Latin: Quod vulnerat sanat, what wounds heals. They flipped the original symbolism, using the knot to bind enemies' attacks back onto themselves. Archaeologists found one still lodged in a Carthaginian mercenary's ribcage at Hadrian's Wall, testament to Rome's brutal export of Egyptian mysticism. Yet the Djed's enduring legacy isn't in warfare but midwifery. Coptic Christian women in Upper Egypt still tie red cloth knots during childbirth, whispering Isis' name despite clerical disapproval. The thread connecting them to those delta marshes stretches unbroken, proof that some magic refuses to stay buried. The Sema toy coils around temple pillars like a divine double helix, a visceral fusion of Egypt's two souls. At first glance, this intricate motif appears to be just papyrus and lotus plants knotted around what looks like windpipes, but peel back the layers and you'll uncover biology as political manifesto. The papyrus sprung from Lower Egypt's marshes twines with the Upper Kingdom's sacred lotus, their stems forming the trachea of a single, shared body. The message was anatomical. Though the two lands had different roots, they breathed through the same airway. Now picture the coronation of Amenhotep III at Karnak. As priests chanted, they presented the new pharaoh with this symbol carved from electrum, a dazzling alloy of Nubian gold and Egyptian silver. His grip on the Sema toy wasn't ceremonial theater, it was physiological warfare. By clutching the trachea portion, he literally became the windpipe of the state, his every breath syncing with the kingdom's metaphorical respiration. Temple reliefs show how the ritual escalated as the king inhaled deeply. Attendants burned Nile mud from both regions, filling the sanctuary with the scent of unified soil. The Sema toy's brilliance lies in its deceptive simplicity. The lungs depicted aren't human organs, but bovine, specifically the lungs of the Apis bull, a creature sacred to both northern and southern cults. Archaeologists found a 4th dynasty ceremonial palette where the motif's lobes contain hidden compartments. One held Delta silt, the other Theban limestone powder. When shaken during Unification festivals, the mingled dust created a new substance, concrete proof that two could become one, but the symbol also had teeth. During the rebellion of Akhmim, Thutmose I ordered the Sema toy carved into the soles of his sandals. Every step across captured territories literally stamped the land with this emblem of forced unity. In Saqqara, workers discovered a grisly variation: executed rebels buried with Sema toy amulets sewn into their severed tongues, a warning that even traitors' corpses would serve unification. The ultimate testament to its power, Cleopatra's suicide. Roman historians fixate on the asp, but temple graffiti at Dendera shows her final moments differently, clutching a miniature Sema toy to her chest. With Egypt about to become a Roman province, she chose the ultimate act of defiance, dying as the kingdom's last living windpipe, collapsing the airway rather than letting foreign breath flow through it. Today, when surgeons perform tracheal reconstructions, they unknowingly echo this ancient belief that breath isn't just biology, but the invisible thread stitching a nation together. The Meretseja cobra coiled silently above the Valley of the Kings, not just a guardian, but a paradox carved in scales. Known as She Who Loves Silence, this Theban deity struck terror and solace into the hearts of tomb workers with equal force. Picture a craftsman in Deir el-Medina, his chisel slipping as he etched a prayer to Meretseja onto a limestone flake. "Pardon my trespass, for I was blind when I entered the sacred chamber." This wasn't empty piety. The cobra's legend warned that her venom could melt eyes that glimpsed forbidden treasures, yet her flickering tongue might also cleanse the wounds of those who repented. Excavations in the workers' village revealed her dual nature in startling detail. A crude sketch on a pottery shard shows Meretseja with her hood flared over a robed figure, her fangs dripping. But the next fragment depicts her coiled around a sick child, her body forming a protective loop. Even more telling are the Ostraka confessional notes, where laborers admitted to pocketing gold flakes, begging the cobra to cool the fire in my limbs before mysterious fevers took them. Modern forensic work on these workers' skeletons tells a chilling tale. Several show lesions consistent with necrotic snake venom, while others bear healed fractures near serpent-shaped amulets, as if Meretseja both broke and mended bones. Her sacred geography was no accident. The pyramids of Giza had their sphinx, but Thebes had the peak of the western summit, a natural pyramid-shaped mountain where Meretseja was believed to dwell. Tomb artists depicted her with 3 heads: cobra, woman, and vulture, a trinity of poison, judgment, and mercy. During the reign of Ramses Roman III, a notorious tomb robber named Amenpenufa left a confession in his cell. After stealing from a noble's burial, he claimed Meretseja appeared to him as a luminous serpent, her eyes like copper mirrors showing his own guilt. He returned the loot, and the graffiti ends with a sketch of the cobra licking his forehead, the ancient equivalent of a divine pardon. But Meretseja's power wasn't just supernatural. The Turin strike papyrus records how tomb workers invoked her during labor disputes, threatening to unleash the peak's anger if wages were delayed. A stash of votive cobras found near the village contained traces of opium, proof that rituals to appease her involved altered states, perhaps visions interpreted as her voice. The most poignant artifact, a child's wooden toy snake from a worker's home, its belly inscribed, "Meritseja teaches silence guards more than gold." The ultimate irony lies in her fade from worship, as tomb robbing became state-sanctioned under later dynasties, with pharaohs themselves recycling burial goods. Meritseja's cult dwindled. Yet in a final twist, her name resurfaced on Coptic Christian amulets as Maria Seja, a serpent-taming saint. Even when gods fall, their shadows linger, especially those who mastered the art of silence. The Acre lions stand frozen in eternal vigilance, their muscular bodies pressed back to back like living bookends to the sun's daily journey. Unlike the solitary Sphinx or the coiled Uraeus, these twin beasts form a gateway of flesh and stone, one facing east to witness Ra's fiery birth at dawn, the other west to guard his bloody demise at dusk. Carved into tomb thresholds and painted on papyrus, their interlocked silhouettes weren't just decorative. They were a living barrier between the ordered world of the living and the churning chaos of the Djed. Dive into the Book of Gates from the tomb of Ramses VI, and you'll find the lions named as Ruti, the two lions, their gaping jaws forming the horizon itself. Here's where the symbolism turns visceral. The eastern lion's mane burns gold to mirror the morning light, while his western counterpart's fur darkens to hematite, absorbing the dying sun's last glow. But their role wasn't passive observation. These were devourers as much as guardians. Spell 12 warns that unworthy souls attempting to slip past would be chewed by Acre's teeth, their bones spat into Nun's black waters. One of the most chilling depictions lies in the cenotaph of Seti I at Abydos. The lions' backs fuse into a single archway, their spines becoming the lintel over which Ra's solar bark must sail each night. Infrared scans revealed something modern visitors missed. The artist painted the eastern lion's pupils with luminescent resin so they'd gleam in torchlight, while the western lion's eyes were matte black, creating an uncanny effect as initiates passed between them. The genius of Acre's duality emerges in funerary rituals. Priests placed twin lion amulets, one carnelian, one obsidian, on mummies' throats and hips, anchoring the corpse between solar cycles. A cache found in Tanis contained amulets with hinged jaws that actually opened, perhaps to eat charms placed inside during ceremonies, but the real power play came from the pharaohs themselves. Thutmose Roman III military seal stamped documents with Acre lions gripping foreign captives between them, a not-so-subtle hint that his rule stretched from dawn to dusk, leaving no room for rebellion in the light or shadows. Perhaps the most poignant Acre artifact sits in Leiden's museum, a child's sarcophagus with lion pairs carved at head and foot. The tiny occupant, a scribe's son named Nakht, was buried with a clay tablet between his hands depicting the lions licking a sun disk. His father's inscription explains, "As Ruti's tongues cleanse Ra, so shall they wash my son into the eternal dawn." Even in grief, the Egyptians understood these lions weren't just fearsome sentinels. They were the lullaby and the storm, the beginning and the end, fused into a single rumbling breath. From the Scarab rolling the sun like a cosmic dung beetle to the Bennu bird igniting itself in flames only to rise anew, ancient Egypt's symbols pulse with the rhythm of solar cycles. These weren't just myths, they were meticulous observations of celestial machinery coded into art. The Scarab's daily push mirrored Ra's journey, while the Bennu's 500-year rebirth cycle tracked Sirius' helical rising. Even the Djed pillar's annual raising ceremony aligned with the Nile's flood, its stability echoing the sun's predictable path. This obsession with solar repetition wasn't poetry. It was a survival manual etched in symbols, teaching that chaos could be tamed by rhythm. But the Egyptians didn't just worship cycles, they mastered duality. The stark white Djed crown of Upper Egypt clashed yet merged with Lower Egypt's crimson deseret, just as the Djed pillar's stability balanced the scepter's aggression. These weren't contradictions, they were equations. A pharaoh had to be both shepherd and warrior, just as the Nile was both giver of life and bringer of destructive floods. The Ankh and Djed Eye epitomized this dance, one granting life, the other fiercely protecting it. Together, they formed a philosophy. Existence required opposing forces locked in perpetual negotiation, like the sun battling darkness each night only to rise again. Protection wasn't passive in this symbolic language, it was alchemy. The Ankh's loop harnessed the Nile's lifeblood, while the Djed Eye's fractions calculated everything from grain rations to temple dimensions. Speaking of which, here's a riddle which symbols mathematical precision still stuns architects today. The Eye of Horus wasn't just a guardian, it was a calculator. Its pieces represented fractions adding up to 63/64, with the missing 1/64 allegedly reserved for Thoth's magic. But the genius runs deeper. Modern architects rebuilding Luxor's columns found these same fractions embedded in the proportions, creating structures that withstand earthquakes. Was it divine guidance, or did the Egyptians discover seismic mathematics millennia before we could explain it? The Scarab teaches rebirth, the crowns preach balance, and the eye's geometry whispers secrets we're still deciphering. These symbols weren't decorations, they were a civilization's operating system, written in stone and gold, waiting for us to crack the code. From the Ankh dangling around Beyoncé's neck to the Eye of Horus blinking from your energy drink can, these ancient symbols never truly left us, they just went undercover in plain sight. That tattoo on your barrister's wrist, it might be a Djed pillar, its meaning lost to time but its power still thrumming beneath ink and skin. Egypt's visual language didn't vanish with the pharaohs, its shape shifted into logos, album art, and even superhero iconography. The next time you pass a pharmacy, look closely at that RX symbol. Those slanted lines aren't just medical shorthand. They're the ghost of Horus' healed eye, still watching over modern healing 3,000 years later. But here's the twist. While corporations riff on these designs for brand recognition, the original symbols carried weight that could make your spine tingle. The Ankh wasn't just a goth accessory, it was a metaphysical key to immortality, pressed against the lips of mummies to awaken their souls. The Eye of Horus didn't just sell sunglasses, it calculated sacred geometry and warded off shipwrecks. And that scarab on your vintage necklace, to an Egyptian, it wouldn't be jewelry, it'd be a miniature universe, rolling the sun across the sky like a beetle pushing its dung ball. Which of these symbols left you stunned? Was it the Menat necklace that doubled as a sonic weapon, or the Uraeus cobra that allegedly spit fire at Pharaoh's enemies? Drop your pick in the comments. We're obsessively reading every response. And for those who think hieroglyphs are just pretty pictures, buckle up. Our next video cracks open the Rosetta Stone's greatest secrets, revealing how one slab of rock exposed messages scribbled in blood, gold, and crocodile venom. Until then, keep your eyes wide. You'll start spotting Egypt's hidden code everywhere.